Hey everybody, welcome to the Mid-Curve Podcast. We're back again. It is your favorite group of people who are active traders, active investors, active players in the NFT and crypto space. We're excited to be here again as always. It's been a very busy, weird week in the world of NFTs and crypto. Kind of up and down. It's going to be interesting to kind of get into some stuff here. I'm going to go around the table real quick, ask each of our people to introduce themselves really quickly, and then we'll get to our one word of the week. But first, let's just do a quick intro and make sure everybody knows who we are. I'll start. My name is Funky Donk, also Gavin Purcell. Been in the business of this stuff for a bit. Have a background in media and TV, but am pretty active in a bunch of different projects. Eric, what about you?
Hey, it's Eric. I've been at this for almost 2 years now. Previous background was in traditional finance, and all that good stuff.
Great. What about you, Salty?
Hey, I'm Salty. One time I met Vitalik.
There you go. That's pretty good. That's a good intro. I love that.
I've been around
That's
for a
all
little
you
while.
need.
I do
Yeah,
the
that's all you need.
NFTs. It's fun.
Great. And what about you, Grant?
Hey. My background's in consulting, and I've been in this space for 2 years now. And a couple days ago came the closest I've ever been to getting hacked. So I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point.
Oh my God, I'm really interested in hearing. Yeah, I want to hear about that. That's great. Okay. Well, let's first, before we start, every time we do an episode, we like to hear, just get a kind of sense of how people are feeling. We ask all of our members for one word to describe the market this week. Let's start with Eric this week. Eric, what's your one word to describe the market?
Ordinals.
Sorry, say that again. What's that? I couldn't hear you the first time.
Ordinals.
Oh yeah. Okay, good.
He took my word, Funky. That's
Don't worry. You can develop a fork of that word in some way. We can figure out a way you
I'll
can
let
still
Eric
use it.
give his word.
Okay, Eric. Why ordinals?
It's all anybody talks about. This we kind of run back the idea of NFTs on Bitcoin. And now, I think it's transitioned from a really, really interesting experiment to, cash grab.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, that's good. We're going to definitely get into that. It's going to be a big part of our conversation today. Grant, what about you? What's one word for you to describe the market? And you can't say what you've said the last 2 weeks in a row. I don't remember what the word is, but you got to pick a new word this time.
My word's reverb, I think.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think look, Chex has been a revelation, and it's, gotten its sort of moment in the zeitgeist, if you will, and we'll see how long that lasts. And obviously Ordinals have been just crazy this week, but I just don't think we've latched on to a collective narrative that everyone cares about genuinely, right? And I'll go back to the comment that I've been making throughout our short-lived podcast history here, and that there hasn't been a new launch that people have given a shit about in 13 months, right? And that was Azuki. Not saying that Azuki deserves attention right now, because we're all still waiting for their new development, right? But it's kind of like TV post Game of Thrones, if you will, right? Because there's no one unifying theory that's kind of uniting us, and as a result, liquidity just kind of frays around everywhere from chain to chain now, right? Because we had Canto a couple weeks ago, and now we have Bitcoin. Although I'd wager 95% of the transactions being done right now are via ETH as opposed to actual Bitcoin.
Yeah, I want to get into that too, because I have some real thoughts on. I'll tell you what my word is in a second. But okay, Salty, what's your word for the week?
All right, well, Eric stole ordinal because that was going to be my word. My word will be a portmanteau. How about minus 12%? That's my word. Because
okay, what explain that? Let's hear that.
Well, it's just we had that ETH candle earlier this week, and then of course all the alts, took a little step move straight down, or most of them did. But I thought that would be somewhat of a contagion moment, and we'd keep tumbling downward, and maybe we will. I can't predict the future. I can only talk about what's happened. But all these prices went up without huge increases in systemic liquidity or huge increases in stablecoin availability. So it was like the deployment of stables that were already in the crypto world, probably. and then we had wick down, and I figured there would still be enough fear and regulatory announcements and all this stuff. But now we're holding it just 10% lower than we were. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm very confused by some of the price action that's been going on today, or not today, going on this week. But we can talk about it. I mean, obviously, there's some pretty real world maybe triggers for that stuff as well too. I think my word for this week is Chase. And when I say Chase, what I mean is not Chase Bank, although that's probably a fascinating company to dig into on some point. But I think what's happening is people are chasing stuff right now, and it's interesting to me to watch. And we'll get into Ordinals, but as somebody who has been trying to be smarter about stuff and not feel FOMO, I've definitely chased onto Canto late, and I think that I didn't get wrecked, and it's fine. And Canto itself, I think, is okay. I think it really peaked and then has dropped a bit, but then people chasing into Ordinals and trying to find these different ways. And I think there's something really interesting in this idea of this small group of people that we are right now in this space, kind of chasing from one thing to another and trying to find wherever the next thing is, but they're not really next things. We're just chasing something. So that's kind of my vibe of right now, is like everybody's chasing the thing. And it used to be chasing from project to project, and now it feels like we're chasing from chain to chain. And I'm wondering if, in a lot of ways, that's actually hurting the overall ETH, especially the NFT marketplace, because what you're doing is pulling liquidity in different places. So anyway, let's I think it's really interesting for us to jump in, and that's maybe a good starting off point to talk about Ordinals. I'm pretty sure everybody who's going to listen to this podcast is aware of what Ordinals are, but if they aren't, my explainer of this is very simple. One of you can maybe jump in and go a little more technical, but essentially, Ordinals are a new version of NFTs on Bitcoin. They kind of blew up this week in an interesting way. There was a guy a couple weeks ago who kind of created this pathway to make these, and then they started to get some real attention when a specific project, Ordinal Punks, started to get some heat, and then some of those sold for quite a bit of money. But like Grant said, they are mostly being sold with ETH being transferred, even though they're being delineated in Bitcoin. We saw a sale, I think yesterday, for 11 BTC or 10 BTC, which is a lot of money for an Ordinal Punk. It was a Crown Ordinal Punk. It seems like a lot of people have now taken ETH projects and are trying to port them over there in some form or another, for better or for worse. I am not 100% sure about what this means for us so far, but I don't know. Grant, what is your take on Ordinals in general? And then kind of, do you see a future here?
So first off, I wanted to say that, I sort of called this out to our group 12 days ago. And then
yes, you did. You did.
Myself.
Yeah.
Yes. And I just want to give a quick shout out to a community that I'm a part of called Squanchland, who were just in on it so early. And the 11.5 Bitcoin sale was a member from there, and they just kudos to them, right? Because end of January, everyone else was focused on pumping AI shit coins and farming Canto, which is valid, but this was the real sort of generational wealth play here. So for me, I think I personally was fortunate enough to get in on the primary sale of a couple of Pepe projects, one of which was within the first 3,000 inscriptions, and then the other, which only had a couple in the collection, that was in the first 10,000 inscriptions. And then I decided to stop playing basically yesterday, because the night prior I essentially almost got socially engineered, and that's kind of the issue for me, right? In that it's fine that everything's being done on a spreadsheet, but the fact that everything has to be done through DMs, and you just don't know who you're talking to on the other end. Even for someone like myself, who's 2 to 3 years deep, and kind of know who's who in the space, it's incredibly difficult to navigate. To actually answer your question about like where we're going, I'm not too sure, right? Because everyone's latched onto the narrative fairly quickly, because we are, a fairly mature space now. And there's like a fair amount of pretty facetious like mints happening, right? Like, the kind of the seminal photography artist in the space is charging basically 50 Bitcoin from the primary sale for like the same photograph. And we just have already 2 iterations of punks, which are not at all original, even though, provenance can be argued for at least one of those collections, and obviously they're commanding a lot of the liquidity in the space. So I just think it's a little early to tell, but it is sort of innovative and exciting, and I think a lot of the cope on the timeline from ETH maxis and from Bitcoin maxis is definitely driving more of the attention than actual positive interest in the space, which is always a fun trade to make when you can get it.
Yeah, I'm so curious about this in that I think the overall argument that obviously it's interesting, right? Like technically interesting. And yes, I think we should all take a second and shout out the fact that Grantland was very early to this, and many of us ignored him, and we're all sorry, Grantland. Sorry about that. And it's our bags. Our bags are hurt for that reason.
I saw your brief little thing about it. I was like, whatever. And then 3 days ago, you posted about it. It was like 2 and 1 in the morning. I had to get to work the next day, but I was like, wait, what is this? I started reading. I said, oh my gosh, I should have taken the time to read about it 12 days ago.
Yeah, Salty, you actually went pretty hard in on this, right? And
I'm
as
still going
somebody
hard on
who's
it.
yeah, okay, so tell me give me your bull case for this. I mean, the thing that I keep thinking about is like the idea of unlocking liquidity that is existing in the BTC marketplace, but I don't know if I've seen that yet. But what is your like kind of like take on this?
I want to I would modulate your description of what ordinals are to begin with, which is that ordinals are the NFT on the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain. All the stuff people talk about mostly is things like the Satoshi cards or whatever. Those are counterparty NFTs. It's not really genuine to call them Bitcoin NFTs. There's a pointer on Bitcoin that directs you to something on counterparty. There are the colored coins was one of the very, very earliest experiments of doing something on chain. And of course, Satoshi himself posted some data that wasn't just blocked, transfer data on chain. But really, this is I'm arguing and continuing to argue that this is paradigmatic. This is a new thing that never existed, which is a on-chain NFT, truly held, transferable, fungible, sellable, viewable, completely within Bitcoin. Nothing else needed. Of course, you need to run additional wallet software, but that wallet software is not doing anything outside of Bitcoin. That's a really big deal. And my bull case is simple: is that Bitcoin is still, much to ETH or other altcoin people's chagrin, it still is the bedrock of the crypto world. It is still the cryptocurrency people think about, especially normies. And it still has the largest market cap. It still attracts the highest wealth and type individuals who don't want to go dabbling in other things. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm not saying it's like the end all be all, but it still is the most important thing in the crypto world, even though it doesn't do anything. Right. So that's the thing, is if you're into Bitcoin, 10 years, you've had nothing to do except stack sats and hodl and lose all your money on Celsius and BlockFi and Ledin and all the other stuff the Bitcoin maxis were shilling back when they were getting paid to do it. You had nothing to do. People talk like, this new financial world, but if you want to buy stuff, you turn your Bitcoin into dollars. If you want to use it for anything, you turn it into dollars or into something else. Maybe it won't be like that forever, but really there's been nothing to do with Bitcoin. So you had to sit there and stack sats while you watch these alleged shitcoiners, as you call them, build incredible financial worlds your mind could never imagine, do experimentation on economic and monetary scales that were completely unprecedented, have access to products and means of investment and financialization that no one used to have access to from their home computer, trade JPEGs, or you watch all this unfold, and what could you do? You can just go on interview shows and talk about how everyone's a shitcoin and Bitcoin's the only real crypto. And now there's
you get the negative side, yeah. Sorry,
You
go
can
ahead. Yeah.
actually buy something with Bitcoin now on Bitcoin. Like that's a big deal. So it's a short bull case. I don't know if it actually plays out like this. I'm over invested, of course. Liquidated my kids' college funds. It's all in Ordinals, mostly in derivative shitty punk projects. Really.
Well, this is all interesting, and I think that's a really interesting take, Salty. I guess my big question in this way is, so I don't know so when you talk about the Bitcoin maxis, right? We all know those types of people who have believed forever that Bitcoin is the end all be all. They do shit on other chains. They often, when ETH was coming up and becoming big, it was definitely a giant kind of fight between the two people. Is there any sign that people who are, I don't even call it Bitcoin maxis, but people who are Bitcoin first, let's say, are actually tuning into this and understanding it and care about it in the way that you're talking about? Or is this just kind of all smoke and mirrors and it's ETH people trying to look for the next kind of like unlock in terms of money? That's my big question here, is I don't really fully know yet if this is something that is going to be interesting to Bitcoin people at all. Like, so I don't know. Eric, do you have a take on that? Like, do you think this is something that has a chance to become like a large pool of liquidity, or do you think it's just too early to know?
I'm not going to write anything off, but I think the question here is, like, when do the BTC maxis fully come? Because at the moment, if you go into any of these Discord for ordinal inscriptions, most of the assets are still being custodied by the project founders because the people buying and selling them don't know how to set up like a wallet or a BTC node so they can actually transact on their own, and they don't really want to because they're just here to kind of flip. I think if you do actually get a case where real BTC people start to tweet about this, they start to use it, you start to see a lot of self custody coming into these projects. Then maybe I think that's a good sign of adoption. But everything from where I said that's happened so far has been sort of people kind of chasing the next narrative. And I think the project creators also understand that, and they're being accommodated because everyone's working on this marketplace solution, so more of the transactions can move off of OTC escrow, and I think some teams are definitely trying to figure out a way where you can transact via a Taproot without having to install a Bitcoin node. So I don't know. Right now, it still feels like it's the ETH guys that are kind of driving this. But Salty's right. Like, the moment where real BTC people start to step in and participate, that's going to be huge. Like, I think, like, in that situation, if you're holding on to sub 10K ordinals, you'll probably do very, very well. I just at this point, I just don't have confidence to say that's actually going to happen.
I want to, Eric's, the escrow thing is a whole interesting thing, because there's Bitcoiners who clearly think this is a scam. It's obviously a scam because, as they say, the trades aren't even happening because they can't wrap their mind around the level of degeneracy it takes to pay 4 Bitcoin for somebody to update a Google Sheet address. They say, look, there's not even being transferred, and it isn't being transferred.
That's the most incredible thing to me. I think of this as just a person watching it, is when you look at that ordinal. I remember the first time I clicked through to that ordinal punks Google spreadsheet, and I was like, oh, what is this? There's literally a bid list on this. There are all the things you would see in a marketplace, and now it's on a Google spreadsheet, and people are using it. And I was just like, holy fuck! And
real sums of money on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about $50,000 that's being tracked and sold on plus, you know what I mean, on these Google spreadsheets. So I guess my other big question becomes is, so Grant, you did a lot of work on this early on. You did the technical work. I remember watching you kind of like walk through it for us and stuff in our Discord. Do you think that the technical aspects of this are going to get figured out relatively quickly? I mean, one of the things people have been teasing a bit this week is a marketplace of some sort that would make it easier to transact. Do you think that's coming, or what's your take on where the actual I don't want to say it's not liquidity, it's more about the friction, where the friction can ease so that we'll see more of this stuff happen?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I'm not sort of up to date on the latest with respect to like, a wallet that you can actively transfer in and out of and a marketplace per se. I think, I mean, one half is the narrative, like getting, as others have already pointed out, like people who actually use Bitcoin to kind of join the ride, as opposed to say, I'm just gonna hang on to my actual Satoshis, or actual coins. And then the other half is just, I think, delineating like what's provenance versus what's not, because I think there's plenty within the first 10K inscriptions that are not, that just don't fit what I would call, good art or good avatars or good anything, right? Not to mention we're already, pushing close to like 50K inscriptions and people are charging just exorbitant sums of money. And then we have, on the ETH side, like, anything that was even remotely linked to ordinals or named, or had ordinals in the name, like just did random, 10x wicks ups and down. And I don't think we have enough liquidity to support that. And there's just friction everywhere. And I'll say it, like I was just spooked by almost getting hacked, and I said, I'm just gonna sit this out for a while and see where we come from. So
Yeah,
I mean,
can you
I
can you
think
walk through that? What happened? Like, how was that? I mean, I don't if you feel comfortable, just kind of telling us what happened with that situation. Was it just a fishing exhibition sort of thing?
Yeah, like because every trade is kind of done through DMs, and only once you've kind of locked down a deal do you bring in the project owner, who has your asset in escrow usually, and does the official confirmation of transfer of funds and transfer of asset. And you just spend hours and hours talking to different people, and you start to lose track of who you're talking to at what price point. And eventually, it was so late in the evening, and this person said, join this other Discord where there are people who might want to bid on your asset or purchase on your asset. And that's the other thing, right? Like there's no centralized suppository of projects even, right? Like every single project is its own Google sheet, right? It's not like everything is on one spreadsheet even, let alone the absurdity that the settlement layer is just a document. So yeah, they had me join this Discord, and there was just this weird verification link that I clicked on it, and thankfully I had a couple layers of protection that informed me that I was paying gas for this verification transaction, which I shouldn't have been doing. It was just like, it spooked me because I'm usually not very cavalier with this kind of stuff, and I'm not an OTC guy. Shout out to Cirrus and guys like Eric and Pomp who do it regularly. It's incredibly taxing, and there's so much friction involved, right?
It's exhausting. When I was trying to buy my ordinal, and the project admin, the project creators were being escrow, but I kept checking back and forth between the DMs and the channel to make sure it was the same person. I'm like, I'm getting scammed. Am I getting scammed? And in the back of my mind, it's like, how the fuck would I even know? Because it's the first time I've used the Taproot wallet. So like, if they say they sent it to me, like literally at that point in time, I was on my phone trying to get this deal done. I couldn't tell if that was like, I would have no clue whether or not that was actually real. So it felt very, very sketchy. This is like,
Yeah, it's back alley deals, right? Like that's
yeah,
what's so weird to me about this whole thing is that, like, I mean, going back to the fact that you're talking about, we're working in crypto and working on the blockchain, and now we're doing back alley, like open my trench coat and I'll show you my ordinal sort of deals, which
yeah.
is like so weird.
Oh.
I'm just laughing to myself because we keep talking about what does it take to like let's onboard normies, and obviously,
Yeah.
the thing to do it is settlement via Excel spreadsheets
Well,
because that
everybody can access a spreadsheet, Eric. That's how it works, right?
that's true. Yeah, and the myriad of very malicious macros that come with that.
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about what Grant got into here a little bit, which is provenance and historical value. So, okay, there's a couple things going on. Many people have kind of argued that like most of the ordinals that are sub 10K, and what that means is like, they've kept a track of how many ordinals have been created. And I think we're at like close to 50, 60, 70K right now, somewhere around there. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but the sub 10Ks have, according to at least the powers that be or people who say things in this space, have some historic value. But as Grant said, like a lot of that stuff is just like people who got there early and uploaded something for the fun of it. I mean, I think the second thing that was uploaded was an image of a crypto dick butt, which is great, very hilarious. My question becomes, so yeah, we talked a little bit about this. There's the ordinal punks, which were early and kind of unique. And I know a lot of people have talked about the fact that they might be a copy of mutant punks, but there's a lot of arguments back and forth about the fact that it was an open source GitHub that those came from, whatever. The thing that happened that was interesting, obviously, was somebody took all 10,000 crypto punks from the ETH chain and ported them over and called them BTC punks. There's kind of mixed feelings on that. My big question is like, what of those early collections is interesting and why? Is there any? And I know people who in this chat, including myself, have a piece of some of the bags in there. But like, what makes the early collections interesting? And is there value to any of that randomness stuff or the random stuff that's there? Or are we going to see real value come from when somebody launches like, let's call it a legit original project on Bitcoin? Like who has thoughts on that? Anybody have a thought on that?
We brought it up before that this under 10K thing. We've each probably alluded to that. I mean, it's a meme, but it probably has some mimetic sticking power.
Okay, but just as a counterpoint, so Salty, actually, I want you to talk more about the fact that it is like a new paradigm and it could have staying power, but just answer me this. Like, do you know what the first 10K NFTs on Ethereum are?
I don't know the first 10K, but yeah, I mean, I know the first projects insofar as the ones we've discovered, even before the EIPs were written to really make NFTs a thing.
Here's my question. Yeah, what is there one of those that you can point to and say like it's got a massive value because of that right now? Is there something that in that collection, the first 10K on ETH,
CryptoPunks?
Right.
I mean, there's a reason they're so valuable, right? But no, I mean, Ether Rocks. What were the early ones? Crypto Kitties is the one that really blew everything up, right?
And what value do they have today?
Crypto Kitties like produced infinite versions of themselves, right? There was Etheria. Was a really early one, and that one is still tradable. The problem is some of these like really aren't tradable, or they have to have wrappers. I don't know. I don't think what I'm saying is not because it was early, it must be valuable. I'm just saying like the 10K meme is sticking right now. That's all I'm saying. Also, the way Ethereum works, there's I think less to be said for provenance in terms of mere chronology. But in Bitcoin, because there's so much less ability to do things, there's no smart contract language per se. The only source of provenance can be chronology. I think it's some of the potential is driven by the limitations of the form. But yes, there are whole communities I would say that spend a lot of time trying to buy very valuable things that were early on Ethereum. Whether like so probably the first NFT uh, that is actually kind of similar to what we're doing on Ordinals right now is what was it, Terra Nullis, Terra Nivalis, whatever it was called. I mean, it was like you could inscribe some words on Ethereum, so to speak. That thing, popped off a little, and of course, it's worth zero because somebody just built a wrapper around it. Then with the wrapper, you could mint new ones, so they weren't real old ones. Um, I don't know what that looks like on Bitcoin. A good counterexample, because I'm not saying this is definitely going to be under 10K is where the value is. A good counterexample is ENS, right? There are very rare ENSs. And there is a chronological ENS collection. They call them the pre-punk ENSs. And they're not particularly valuable, right? They're not worth a lot. So I could see it going either way. And we talked about this earlier. You know, a lot of the Bitcoin world is not onboarded into this, and a lot of the value right now is like Streisand effect value. It's ETH and BTC people fighting, it's
Yeah.
drama, it's land grab, right? So I think like any land grab, there's no guarantee that the land you grab will be valuable. But probabilistically,
we could be looking at swamplands. Is that what you're talking about?
Is that a sandbox
hey,
dig
I'm
right
not.
there?
No, the Saudis are bidding. It's okay. No, I'm just saying that that probabilistically, the earlier your inscription, the more likelihood is that it has some value based merely on its chronology. If you can't get something really cool and really early, yeah, I would wait for like actual interesting projects with actual known artists or actual people you want to own stuff by to come out. I'm not going around. I've bought some sub 10K stuff. It's stuff that I think, is part of a collection and is put out by people who are big players in the ordinal space, or has some narrative, some cohesiveness to it. Right? I'm not buying random pictures that were inscribed under 10K, and I don't think probably most people should. I mean, maybe you have a little moon bag of them, but
If they don't catch a lawsuit from Nintendo, I think Shrooms is doing a wonderful job of creating
oh
hype,
yeah.
and they're probably gonna cash out a lot of money on the primary market.
The Shrooms are a cohesive project with a good narrative and really
Yeah, explain what those are real quick, because I think people may or may not know who are paying attention to this. I think that's one of the more
Grant
interesting
can
things.
do that. He's bigger in
Yeah,
Shrooms than me.
Grant's been tracking Shrooms.
I'm not in the Discord. I can't even simp.
Oh shoot, I'm not in the Discord either.
It's genuinely good art. They're all, I think sub 2K inscriptions. I could be wrong on that, and they're not in anyone's lane, right? Because there's two Pepe projects in the first 10K. Ord punks are gonna win because that's where all the liquidity is. But there's already a second punk project. There's no good generative art project that I know of. Maybe ordinal loops can be a thing, but shrooms are just their own thing, right? Like they're legitimately fun. They're not like yeah, they're just not a ripoff of anything on ETH, so it instantly just catches your eye.
How dare you? Cyber Shrooms was an amazing old project that I lost a fair amount of money on when Kongs pumped it.
Fungible fungi. There were so many mushroom projects, but
there's so many mushroom projects. Oh yeah, I also, what was that one with? Remember the Chinese Baidu shrooms that were more recent? Anyway, I think all that makes sense. My other question with this stuff becomes so one thing I want to point out is last one of these we did was a lot of it was about Canto, right? Canto NFTs and the interesting kind of things happening there. And one thing to kind of connect these two things that just happened on Canto, and Eric, I think you remember the name of this guy better than I do, but there was a really interesting generative art project that just launched on Canto, and it actually is doing pretty well, unlike almost every other Canto NFT, because the original Canto NFTs were all kind of crap. Not to shit on anybody's long necks. Those are pretty cool. But my question is going to be is like, I'm wondering if, unlike Justin Aversano, like you mentioned, Grant, who I think it looks pretty bad to me. He looks like he's kind of just trying to cash out on something. Not to shit on him, but I don't love the look of what he's doing. But I'm wondering if there is a gen art project that's going to come out and might be that version of of whatever the next really interesting project is. And I guess at that point, the level of inscription doesn't matter as much, right? It's more of like, what is the person going to do on that chain on BTC that's going to be interesting, and is there a way to kind of make it? Is anybody tracking one of those yet? Has anybody seen an interesting artist that's talked about this or that's interested in doing that?
I'll give some context into the Canto project. I think you're talking about Speranza by Giorgio
right.
Balbi. He's had two smaller collections on Ethereum that's done some moderate success, and I think so. I think one of the reasons that he picked Canto for Speranza was because one, obviously Canto was having its moment in the sun, but two, a lot of his big collectors are actually very, very involved in the Canto scene. And I think that really, those conversations really tipped it over. The launch itself was pretty unwieldy. I think it was a rough. It's really just him and maybe like one other mod helping him out. So it was like rough goings, handling, figuring out how minting works on Canto, and then also, realizing that just Alto was not as robust as OpenSea in terms of the ability to handle like definition images. So they're still working through the issue of like a lot of people's stuff not showing up on Alto correctly because the files are like 20 megabytes, and Alto's just pulling these directly from Arweave. So it was just taking forever for anything to load. I think eventually maybe there is a real generative artist that wants to do something genuine. I think with Ordinals, but it's a learning process because as Salty said, the medium is pretty limited on, and it's not, it's kind of unwieldy. And I think the challenge will really be, they want to see, obviously, like there's a lot of opportunity cost, right? Like you have other chains to pick from in terms of releasing your art. And I think Ethereum still remains like the proven route for any established artist with some visibility that wants to successfully launch a project. So this I think this is so much up to the artist, the community, as it is the artist. An artist has to come in and do something interesting, but the community also has to follow. If we continue to along this kind of down this road of just the ordinal land grab, then I don't think we're going to get a lot of generative art in the scene, because it just comes down to a numbers game. And why would a generative artist that's doing interesting things not just launch on ETH with already established platforms, versus kind of do this and have to do things like via settlement layers, have to deal with the issue that there's really no way to enforce royalties. So what they're really just selling their art outright, and whatever they make off the art is going to be from those initial primary sales.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated because we've now kind of created something new that, to Salty's point, like, yes, it's great and interesting that all this stuff is happening on BTC, but like a lot of these problems that we are talking about now were solved by the ETH situation with ETH, and I think it's going to be an interesting thing. I keep coming back to like the only real reason to think about this space, and this may sound like cynical, is just truly the amount of liquidity that's locked up in BTC, and that there is a world where, from a financial standpoint, if projects work like Shrooms, if Shrooms like works, like that, there could be people in the BTC space who want a version of something like what we have on ETH on BTC. But I don't know. I just don't know if the ecosystem to build the stuff around it is going to be there. And I guess that it will always follow the money, but there's just so many things that have been built on ETH, and I'm just not sure. I don't know, kind of feels like going backwards weirdly to me. Like it feels like we're taking a step back doing this. I don't know, Salty, what's your thought?
I'll try to say briefly. I always say I'm going to be brief and then I'm not, but I'll say like, so take Cardano for example. Cardano's a UTXO network.
Please take it, take it, and get rid of it.
Cardano's a UTXO.
Please take it and leave the room.
It's very complex to build on. It's never been more valuable than ETH in terms of market cap. No one cares at all about the NFTs on Cardano, and yet tons of tooling has been built out. Marketplaces, wallets. I mean, there's all sorts of tooling and stuff. And you could easily ask yourself, why does no one care about NFTs on Cardano? It's because, no one uses Cardano for anything really to begin with. I would say no offense to Cardano holders out there, but I do mean some offense. If you hold Cardano, you've been tricked. Okay, that's fine. Not financial advice. But Bitcoin is not Cardano, and it's not even ETH. The tooling is getting built at a rapid pace, so I don't see a concern there. It's actually like really exciting to see what people are coming up with. Really cool stuff on chain, off chain, and I would also say that the constraints are, if all you're used to is ETH, Bitcoin feels very constrained, but those constraints breed incredible innovation. If you don't want constraints, Just go to Solana or build on AWS. There's a reason we build in these constrained networks that we're creating, right? Like, no, there are people who say, "Oh, don't use ETH; it's slow. Oh, the transaction fees are high," and those people are misguided. It's not about what's fastest and cheapest. If you want fastest and cheapest, don't use a blockchain at all. Blockchains are slow and expensive, and there's a reason for that. There's a lot of tooling getting built. Constraints, I think, breed really interesting innovation, and especially from like Bitcoin devs who are real like hardcore nerd programmer types. I'm not talking about the maxis. I'm talking about the people who actually build this stuff. And they have created, again, something to do with Bitcoin. When just a few weeks ago, there was literally nothing to do with Bitcoin except send remittances overseas and pay journalists and in despotic countries and stuff like
that. Yeah.
Yes, Salty. So let me turn this back on you, right? Like, I don't dispute the idea that we can develop tooling within Bitcoin to facilitate NFTs, but if that's the case, why wouldn't Bitcoin people just eventually migrate to ETH or other chains for NFTs? Because, to me, I think intellectually, like it's just if an NFT ecosystem gets built on Bitcoin and people accept it, it seems like they're also accepting that the blockchain has more use beyond sort of a censorship resistant means of transferring financial wealth. And if that is the case, then don't the floodgates open and shouldn't people like who think rationally start to accept that, hey, like Ethereum does serve some utility and NFTs as a whole are not a scam and can exist as sort of this store of value or an expression of art that has real as both that should have provenance in both like the digital world and the real world.
Yes, but what percentage of those people will realize that? Well, what percentage of people will realize that? Because if you only ever hold Bitcoin and call all other coins shit coins, you're not that rational of a person to begin with, most likely. And then of the fraction that do realize that, what percentage of them will sell every Bitcoin they have and migrate completely to ETH? I don't think they would do that either. I think the niche that Bitcoin occupies is I would argue insurmountable. There is no other proof of work chain that really matters. There is no other top coin in the world being accumulated by very risk averse funds and people. Like very risk averse. I mean, there's old money that is still willing to buy Bitcoin. I don't think anything else fills that niche. And I still think proof of work is meaningful. I think that narrative, and it's not just a narrative, it matters that everything else is proof of stake, distributed proof of stake. So the consensus matters and the things that it's built for matter. But I agree with what you're saying. Like if this cracks open the heads of people who have closed themselves off to the rest of the crypto world, that's great. But I don't think they'll sell every Bitcoin they own and just migrate completely off it.
No. And that's not what I'm saying. I don't think it's gonna make it's gonna be this like come to God moment and they just dump everything and move on to other blockchains. I think it's more so an acknowledgement of the fact that other blockchains can and should exist because they facilitate very important functions that Bitcoin itself maybe is not suited for. It's a ecosystem. Like this maximalism is stupid, and if you're a maximalist, you're stupid. And that I'll go on record and say that because it's just the underlying technology itself can serve so many different purposes. And I just think like when you're having these little shit fights over which chain is better, while Gary Gensler is trying to basically debank the onboarding rails of everything within the US, it's a fucking waste of time. Like, what are you doing? Right. So I really like the fact that, Bitcoin as old as it is still doing these, still interesting things are happening. And I hope that there is actually a good NFT ecosystem that comes out of it. Not just because I own Ordinals, just because I think it will be better for the space as a whole. Right. But then it's interesting questions is how do you enforce royalties? Can you enforce royalties? If you can't enforce royalties, what are the benefits for artists to come onto Bitcoin? And how does that process, play out? Is it going to be friendly to new artists, or is it going to be a medium where established artists can start to get, more value for their work up front? Like, those are really interesting questions. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it. With that being said, I think like 80% of what's happening right now is just like, so this is gonna go through the normal boom and bust cycle where eventually these things are down 80%. But I think if development in the space doesn't go to zero, then it's, eventually the Lindy rule applies and the ecosystem will exist.
I would make clear that nothing I'm saying is in regards to price and price appreciation. It's really, especially technical and sociological, because what you're seeing unfold here is a religious war. And, it's not unbelievers who are the worst. It's the apostates who are the worst heretics. So when you see Bitcoin maxis, especially many years old ones, start to loosen their worldviews, you're going to see the tribunals start to form.
I can't wait for that. That'll be a fascinating experience to kind of see. Okay, you know what we should do? We've been going quite a while on this, so let's move on. I do want to actually, speaking of Gary Gensler stuff, I think it's probably worth touching on that. And then I have a new segment I'm gonna surprise everybody with that won't take too long. But I think we should talk about the Gary Gensler stuff this week. We should kind of quickly give our thoughts on it. It's pretty not great, I think. I mean, just to recap, I mean, I don't know, Eric, you could probably TLDR this the fastest just so we don't have to spend a ton of time explaining it, but you want to just kind of like quickly say what happened?
Yeah, so basically last week, the SEC went after Kraken on their staking as a service offering. And as a result of that, Kraken came to a settlement where they're paying $30 million fine. They're no longer offering staking as a service within the US. And then there's also, on the back of that, there's rumors that basically every major banking institution that's something to do with crypto is going to get a wealth notice. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a wealth notice is, it's basically a written letter from the SEC saying that an infraction has been committed in some way. And so, the perception is this is the SEC's push to deplatform crypto in the US. They are going after established players like Coinbase and Kraken, who have made efforts to be regulatorily compliant. And they are also going after the banks in an effort to basically eliminate the onboarding and offboarding rails for these institutions, which obviously would be very, very impactful. There's also rumors that Paxos, which manages BUSD, is being investigated. And I think this overall and the reason why crypto rolled over is that this is like a very, very I think concerted. The perception is that this is a concerted effort to basically cut off just deplatform and cut off access to digital financial systems. To cut that I'm messing this up, but to basically cut off access to, if you're a crypto firm, the SEC wants to cut off your access to traditional finance platforms. They want to eliminate your ability to get loans, to get banking services, to get onboarding, to offboarding, which really impact the day-to-day operations of your business. So we will see what happens next. I think the perception is that Coinbase's staking as a service program is going to be next in the crosshairs for the SEC. And so what you saw is overall crypto rolled last week, crypto as a whole rolled over, but the LSD providers actually did okay. And I think that the market read is that a lot of those staking flows are ultimately going to flow to liquid staking providers like Lido, Ripple, Frax, what have you. But this is, I think, like, it's too early to say what's actually going to happen. But I just, it just shows that like we still have a really, really shitty regulatory regime in the US. The SEC doesn't seem to have actually tried to work with crypto as an industry in good faith. And I just do not think that Gensler as a whole is fit to be chairman of the SEC, especially in light of what happened
FTX,
with
yeah.
FTX. Because all he's done is refuse to provide clear guidance, go after people that actually try to operate in good faith within the US, push shady, questionable activity offshore as a result out of the scope of US regulators, which eventually contributes to FTX, and it will contribute to further blowups. So if you're kind of stepping back and look at this, I just how can anybody rationally look at this and say like, okay, well, this is the right approach, and we're regulating into the industry rationally, and we're actually encouraging technological advancement and growth relative to competitor.
I mean,
nations.
I would argue that this is. I mean, listen, politics is a couple things. It's on the surface, it's always one thing, and then under the surface, it's another. The thing that I keep thinking about this is that just from a pure personal people standpoint, this is Gensler trying to make up for FTX in a way, which is hilarious to me because like FTX was such a just incredible house of cards that he was ostensibly part of in some ways. I mean, I'm not saying he's part of it, but in terms of being around to like prop it in a specific way. And what it feels like to me is somebody in power said to him, "You fucked up, and now you've got to like fix it." And this is like how really bad decisions get made, right? Just when you think of like, imagine the government as a business. What's happening here is like somebody did something really bad, and now in order to like make it look like he's better, he's going far to the other direction. And it feels like a really bad kind of boomerang moment in general. And I don't know. I also, the thing that is just frustrating to me is like, I don't know if anybody, did you guys see the video that Gary Gensler put out where he compared stake STAKE to STEAK, and it was like this kind of like goofy fun video with audio, like fun music, and it just felt like, what the fuck is going on here? Like it's
Very
just it
disturbing.
really was kind of shocking to me. Yeah.
It's a PR push. You're right. He's trying to make people forget that he completely bungled FTX, right? And he was, and just in case anybody forgets, he was on the verge of giving these guys preferential
Yeah,
treatment
Couldn't have done a worse
before
job
they blew
with
up.
FTX.
And
yeah.
So it's just there is no like the regulatory approach and the framework, and I think like the Hester Pierce dissent is worth reading for anybody that's interested. Is pretty clear. Like there is no they don't want crypto in the US.
Who said that? What did you reference?
Hester Pierce, there's a dissenting opinion of Hester Pierce on basically their staking as a service and their determination that it was a security. And she basically outlined, I think, a lot of the points that people have been making, which is how can you do this without providing regulatory clarity, and regulation via legislation is sort of the worst way to registration via litigation is the worst approach for this, which is in effect what they're doing. It's like, Brian Armstrong has come out on record and said, like, look, we keep asking for clarity, and we don't hear back. He refuses to meet with us. And the only way we get regulatory clarity is basically when there's enforcement action against us. Like, how do you expect anyone to kind of want to operate in that environment? Like, that's just, it's not at all accommodative. And I think it really sets the space back. Because what is going to happen is that I think overall, right, it is definitely not perfect, but the US has a good framework for regulating securities, regulating markets, financial systems, and bringing some transparency into these entities and forcing them to account, to operate by certain standards. And basically, when you say I don't want you here, you're not really. I think like driven entrepreneurs are not going to say like, well, we're just going to shut down our business. I think they're just going to offshore their business as a means to survive. But that opens the floodgates because now you're no longer under the regular purview of anybody, and it's Pandora's box. Like sorts of things can really happen, and this is where bad actors start to thrive. So overall, I just really hate this. And if if anybody saw like Jesse Powell's thread after, in light of it, they're like, why don't you fight it? And he highlighted that he thought there was just going to be an ugly, bruising, drag out fight. And I think people's other interpretation is that Kraken, as a whole, the way that they frame their staking as a service to customers probably also put them on the wrong foot. But then again, like, how are you supposed to know when there's no regulatory clarity? So I think they just made the decision that we're going to cut our losses and move on. And it's really, really unfortunate because, you like Coinbase and I think Kraken are good stewards about what should be like, they self-regulate. They're largely speaking responsible actors in the space. They don't do anything crazy. But they've also, I think, been limited in their ability to really innovate and roll out new products. So when we complain, well, like they don't really do anything, it's not because they don't want to. I think it's just because they've chosen to operate within the U.S. and be compliant to the U.S. regulatory regime, and that's basically prevented them from doing anything for the last.
Yeah, it's a kind of a. I mean, obviously, we saw ETH price take a hit, and I think BTC took a hit too when all that went down. I think it's worth tracking, and it's going to be something big. Okay. Let's. I have a dumb news segment. It's not that dumb, but it basically.
Wait, can I ask Eric one follow-up question on
Sure,
that?
yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick. So, like, the SEC wants to kill crypto, or the government wants to kill crypto in the U.S. Is that a speculation by people observing what the SEC is doing, or is that really what the SEC themselves is making clear? Like they're saying that, like, we want to end this completely in the U.S.
I mean, they can never say it, right? And I think the same thing about being in public office is you can never really say what you want to do. And so you have to look at the fact pattern. And I really like, the message that they're giving to operators in the US is that, hey, like we're gonna go after the onboarding and offboarding rails because they're going after financial institutions, right? Like remember, what was it? What was the bank Silver? One that does blanking out. Silvergate is being investigated for potential wrongdoing in light of like FTX, right? And I think more of that is going to happen. I think they're going to go after Signature. I think you've already seen some banks basically say, well, the juice is not worth the squeeze in crypto, so we're going to back out. So I think you're going to see more and more of this. And if the Paxos rumors are true, then I don't see any other way to really interpret this.
That makes sense. Yep, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think in November we talked about Silvergate and Paxos just being the primary targets because it is the bottleneck, and it's the way you or I or any other retail individual get their money on-ramped into the ecosystem. I know we want to move on, but I think I just want to leave us on a more positive sentiment. Like I don't go on Instagram anymore, but my girlfriend pointed out to me that Drake very frequently on his stories will post him gambling on various different things on a crypto site. And I think even though it's ugly and it's not necessarily what fine art collectors like ourselves may want the main source of crypto onboarding to be, it's happening before our eyes, even in the darkest depths of the bear market, right? Like it's not going away, even if the only thesis is to be the world's next greatest casino, like Gary Gensler, it's going to outlive you, Gary. You should know that.
You are an older person, Gary. So just be aware it'll be around longer than you will be. That's awesome. Okay, well let's move on because we're getting kind of long in the tooth here in this episode. This is a new small segment I want to do, and it's called NFT Project Death Watch. And basically, what I want us to do is I want each of us to give a score from 1 to 100, with 0 being completely alive and excited to be around for a very long time, and 100 with put it in the coffin and bury it, it's already dead.
Wait, 0 is the best and 100's the worst?
Well, it's called Death Watch, right?
What
So you
scale
want
is
to,
it?
yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
the more death you have, the worse you are, right?
More
Okay,
death.
more death. So
All right.
again, let's be clear. 0 is good. It means that the project will be around for a long time. 100 means it's already gone and forget about it. Okay, so my
This is
first
a Benjamin Button scale.
Yes. Okay, fine. Listen, next time we can switch the scale, but for today, that's my scale. It's what I'm saying. This week's subject of the NFT Death Watch is doodles, which we've talked about a little bit. We have had a clear kind of like pathway through the doodles landscape. The thing that happened yesterday that I think set a lot of people off, I was setting off people is maybe the wrong word, is that Pranksy, who famously doesn't sell very many of their doodles, of their NFTs really at all, started to sell some of their doodles. People were wondering what was going on. Pranksy then tweeted that he wasn't actually like dumping, but he was trying to reorg his collection or their collection into a very specific type of better versions of their doodles. I don't necessarily know if I fully buy that. I will say Pranksy has been probably Doodles' biggest supporter over the last 3 months in terms of what they've bought and all this other stuff. Where do you, the three of you, rank Doodles on the scale of NFT Death Watch? Why don't we start, Grant, with you? What do you think? What's the number you give it and why?
Probably somewhere between 80 to 90. I'll give it 80 because I'm feeling poorly for the community.
That's fair.
That was just like an all-time moment yesterday. It was, it brought me back to Do Kwon last summer tweeting out "Steady lads." Like that was the only app parallel I could think of. I think it's a zombie project from here on out, realistically, unless there's a leadership change, and I don't think that's plausible, given the fact that it's kind of the founding team, the backers, and kind of where they're migrating to is just the circle jerk of the old Flow and Dapper crew, right? So that's, I don't think, ever going to change. And the only lifeline they have left is kind of the prominent backers that they have, who might continue to throw them a lifeline until maybe we return to better days, I'll say, in the ETH NFT space. And just the fact that the art is kind of normie centric, right? It's like on the very opposite end of the spectrum, when you contrast it with, like, I don't know, like My Ladies or Dick Butts, right? Like, it's anti-absurd, it's designed to bring you in, if you want, I guess, your children or your family to collect NFTs, right?
Right.
And that's the only saving grace I'll give it. And I feel poorly for kind of the OGs of the community who really, like most projects, by the way, who reach godly heights every cycle. It's built on the backs of community members who day in and day out eat shit for the likes of Poopy.
Very ironic, isn't it? It's a very ironic thing. Okay, let's see, Eric. What about you? What's your score? 0 to 100 in terms of NFT Death Watch for Doodles.
I would say like probably 70. But I think Grant just made a low key burn because he just called Doodles the Jake Flu of NFTs. But I mean, look, Pranksy's message was pretty clear yesterday, right? Is that yes, he's quote unquote realigning his bag to hold the ones that he thinks looks better, but he's also basically telling you he's no longer willing to inject new liquidity into the ecosystem. So for him to buy, he has to sell. I think that's pretty telling as to where he stands with the brand and the franchise as it at this moment. I think a lot of OGs have left with, because they kind of reached a similar conclusion. I just think it's a really it's a hugely missed opportunity when you do those two, and you seem to be answering the question of how can we make flow relevant again versus how can we actually grow our
100%.
brand in a meaningful way.
I think that's a big thing that people need to dial in on, because to me, that is that's like kind of the number one sin that's happened in the last like couple months, is like putting Doodles 2 onto Flow and trying to make it relevant again is like, it's just so obvious when you look at it from the front. And I understand they're trying to do stuff, but God, it's just like, it seemed very brutal to me when that happened.
Yeah, and I think the comms have just not really been there to make people feel comfortable. Their implementation has at net being more extractive than it is additive when it comes to the core holders. So I think the project is in a tough spot. I actually really like Burnt Toast's art, and it's one of the things that pains me, because I do think that yes, it's like a little insensitive, it's normally centric, but I think it, in the right circumstances, like it could have had a lot of success if it was executed much better, and it just wasn't. So now, like, I don't think Doodles or Die. I agree, it's gonna maybe become a zombie brand. Like, my feeling is that in a year or two, when this all becomes clear, Dapper Labs buys, Doodles, the brand, for a fraction of what the last raise was, and it effectively becomes another vassal project under their umbrella.
Can you imagine being the VCs that put money into this project and watching it over the last 6 months? It's just like, God, I can't even imagine. All right, Salty, what's your ranking 0 to 100? And remember, like I said, 100 is most dead.
Well, I could pick 50 out of spite just because I don't like the system. But no, I don't, dude. I don't know. I've been nothing but ordinals all week, so I saw there was this stuff going on, so I don't have a strong opinion. So I'll pick 75 because it's between 70 and 80 that Eric said.
That's fair. And I would personally put myself probably around where everybody put it. It feels like we're in, I have to say, like, and this is the fucking frustrating thing about this space. Like, of all the people that have had blue chips, you have Yuga, and then you have kind of like, Azuki, which I know people in here hold, kind of coming in a I still think a pretty distant second, and all these other projects that we thought were going to like compete at least for second have just fallen off a cliff for various reasons, and it just goes to show you, like, the idea of like the maturity of the management of these projects and people who understand both the Web3 space and the idea of like adult management of projects seems so off to me. And I don't know, the Doodles thing, I think, even though I'm not a holder, and I held for a while, and I actually got out, I had one, I got out at a good price point, but like, it's more disappointing to me than everything. Like, I think that the bummer is it did feel like a project that you could like show to somebody, and I agree with Eric. Burnt Toast's art is very good, and it's a good version of what an NFT can look like. And I even, as not as exciting as the price point on the spaceships was, like, I thought, oh, this is interesting. This is a project that at least is trying something different. And then just to watch them, really starting, like we said, with last summer, where they just like did nothing and said nothing and just kind of completely collapse over time. I don't know, it's just a bummer. And I agree. I think I'd probably even put my number closer to 90 at this point, because it just feels like to come back from here, they're going to have a really big lift in some way. Okay, well, I think we should wrap up here pretty quickly. We've been talking for a while. Very fast before we leave, what is everybody looking forward to this week? Eric, what's your take on what's happening this week? You got anything you're looking forward to?
Looking forward to see if Ordinals can sustain for another week. I think if the narrative keeps growing for another week or two, then this thing has real legs. So I think that's the only thing that people really care about in this space right now. So it is what it is.
That's fair. What about you, Grant? What are you looking forward to for this week?
Looking forward to spending Valentine's Day, claiming my Blur airdrop and seeing where that goes. And Ordinals too, even though I've temporarily, I think, left the space. Like Salty was alluding to earlier, just because it's the Stone Ages right now in terms of execution and security and all that doesn't mean it always has to be the case, and surely people will step up and innovate. And I'm excited for my fellow holders of Ordinal JPEGs to experience some of that innovation hopefully soon.
We actually didn't talk about the Blur airdrop, which I think there is one thing that we should kind of put a pin in, which obviously this is happening on, at least announced by February 14th. I think the interesting thing that there's been a narrative going around where everybody's pulled a bunch of bids off of Blur in anticipation of this airdrop being maybe not a nothing burger, but just that the bids have kind of like larger bids on blue chips have evaporated, and that might be driving in part why the floors have dropped quite a bit over the last week. I'm really fascinated to watch. This is an interesting thing to keep an eye on, and I think my gut is telling me that we're going to see some of that liquidity come back, but who knows? Okay, Salty, what are you looking forward to for this week?
Yeah, I guess Blur. I missed the magically airdrop boxes, so I guess I'll take the second best, which is Blur. It's a joke. No one uses
by the way,
magically.
one thing that drives me crazy in this space is the idea of everybody having different links that they share when they're talking about a project. And I Blur I can get because now almost everybody has Blur. Although I will say, and I'll keep saying this, Blur has to get a better mobile project, because whenever time anybody shares a Blur link when I'm on my phone, you can see it, but you can't really do a lot of interacting with it. And now people are sharing those magically links, and people have NFT nerds links. It's annoying to me. That's just a small annoyance, but I totally get it. By the way, I didn't pay attention to the magically airdrop at all. Is it out? Did they launch their token, Salty, or is it something that's kind of in the future still?
It's just boxes, no tokens yet.
Okay.
So
Somehow they got this interesting idea to drop people boxes based on their NFT activity. I think it's something they came up with. A very novel idea, and you have to click them one at a time to open them.
Oh, they didn't get that part right. Oh my god!
I'm a little disappointed because I actually think the platform is like good to use, and it's like kind of a free NFT nerds now, basically, now that they've opened it up to the public. But they just seem to want to, basically they shoved themselves into this role of like Blur's little brother who hates his big brother. When it's not a Blur isn't the head honcho here who's taken a massive cut of the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, no, and they're a very fine NFT nerds free alternative. So you're right. It was probably a poor choice by them to set themselves up as competing with Blur. That's really good. I think this week I'm looking forward to some, to see how this regulatory stuff unfolds too, and then Ordinals.
Keep pumping your bags, huh? Keep pushing it out.
Whoa.
I'm impressed that none of us mentioned.
I'm not
selling
because I can't. My ISP is throttling my node sync. I can't sell.
It's pretty fascinating. Okay, so for me, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to this week, I definitely, the Blur thing is something I'm really interested in. I think I'm really also interested in seeing the macroeconomy stuff has been really fascinating to kind of watch lately. And there's been all these people talking, and we didn't get into this, but like there's all these people talking about the soft landing versus the non-soft landing, whether or not, the recession, does it exist? Where do we go? I think that like there's going to be a lot of conversation over the next month or so around that. And, if there's a world that like, there is a soft landing, like it's a pretty interesting economic place to get to. And there is a world where if there's a soft landing and nothing, by the way, it's soft landing and nothing else crazy happens in the world, that like the rest of 2023 could be a really interesting time in this space. Because if there's a world where liquidity can start to feel a little more comfortable with kind of coming in, I think is interesting. I think that's a bigger question. I'm not sure if we're going to have an answer to that for a while, but it's at least worth watching now, and it doesn't feel as doom and gloomy as it did 2 months ago, when it felt like we were in for what seemed like a really, really bad 2023. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. All right, I think that's everything. Anybody else have any last minute words before we sign off? All right, well, let's wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for listening. As usual, we are going to have a more regular publishing schedule from here on out. I think Our plan is to get these out on Monday morning so you can have them for the beginning of your week. And as always, be sure to go to our Twitter handle, which is @midcurve, MIDCURVE. Follow us. We do some tweets from there. I think we're going to be doing some more interesting stuff coming up with Midcurve and trying to get it out there. So thanks everybody for listening. Follow us, tell people about us, share on your socials, and say hi to us on our own socials. And thanks so much for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.